Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Connected Communities Scrutiny Committee, being held on Tuesday the 27th of February 2024. For those present in the meeting room, if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest exit and make your way to the fire assembly point in the car park. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and is making a recording. For participants in the room, please use the microphones to speak, pressing the button on the right of the unit and speak directly into the microphone. Thank you. Please ensure that mobile phones, laptops and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record public meetings, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If there are any members of the public present who do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please raise your hand now so that any such person filming or photographing may be made aware. There is no such person. Procedure and etiquette. Only committee members present in the meeting room may vote. We have some people in attendance as virtual participants. Can I please request that you use the raise hand feature within the system if you wish to contribute, and introduce yourselves when you are called upon. I believe that whenever any of us in the room speak, we will have subtitles saying who we are. Is that correct? Correct. Yes, with our lovely new system. Okay, let's crack on with the meeting then. So item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from committee members Councillor Roger Phillips and David Hitchener, and 2 named substitutes. I'd like to welcome Councillors Elizabeth Foxton and Richard Thomas. Thank you very much for attending. You're present as named substitutes for Councillors Hitchener and Phillips respectively. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any interests in any agenda item? We have no declarations. Item 4, minutes. The minutes document of the meeting held on the 8th of November 2023 is included in the agenda at pages 11 to 18. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Are you all content that I sign the minutes as an accurate record? Those who were in the meeting, thank you very much. Good. Item 5, questions from members of the public. A question has been received from a member of the public, Mr. Peter Mackay, and a response has been published in Supplement 2 to the agenda. The questioner has the opportunity to submit a written supplementary question or join the meeting to ask their supplementary questions. Supplementary questions are to be no more than 1 minute in length and must include a question. Can I ask the clerk to confirm if a supplementary question is to be asked?
Yes, Chair. Mr. Mackay has submitted a supplementary question, which I'll display and read out in just a moment. So Mr. Mackay writes, I wish to express my disappointment that the substance of my question is not to be considered at this meeting, with the next meeting being in May, some 18 months after the scrutiny topic was suggested to the Government Support Team, in conformance with your Gut Involved webpage encouragement to do so. So may I ask why your work programme or any other business is not a routine part of the agenda to cover such matters?
Thank you, Mr. Mackay, for your question. In terms of the question about why we can't include any other business, I have been advised that it is considered not good practice for committees to have an any other business section, because public meetings of council committees, there are rules about papers being provided in advance so that everybody has the opportunity to look at them, etc. I can, however, let you know that we are in fact going to be having a work programme meeting in next week.
It is, yes.
Yes, early March, next week, in fact. So we will, in fact, be taking the issue that you've raised to our work programme meeting, which is next week. It's not a public meeting, but it is looking specifically at the question of what our work programme is going forward. So I assure you we will take your question to that and we will write back to you afterwards. Thank you. Item 6 of the agenda, questions from members of the council. We had a question from Councillor David Hitchener. A response has been published in Supplement 2 to the agenda. Can I ask the clerk to confirm if a supplementary question is to be asked?
No, Councillor Hitchener, I didn't wish to submit a supplementary.
Thank you. And in fact, my response to Councillor Hitchener's question was that we would indeed consider his question under the relevant item of this meeting, which is the next item, item 7 of this meeting. So we will pick that question up. Right, without further ado, let us move on to item 7, which is the policy prioritisation and delivery of section 106 funding. We've been provided with a report which has been published on the council website in the usual way. And I would like to start by inviting the lead cabinet member, Councillor Elissa Swinglehurst, to make opening comments. I note that we are also accompanied by Councillor Barry Durkin, another cabinet member for transport and infrastructure, and we have a range of other officers who I will come to afterwards. So, Councillor Swinglehurst, if you'd like to kick off.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank officers for a comprehensive and detailed report on a subject that is technically complex and has many variations in delivery. As the portfolio holder, I very much welcome this inquiry from the Connected Community Scrutiny Committee, and I'm sure there are areas that you'll be wanting to explore where improvements can be brought. We had got to a place where 106 monies were held up by a lack of capacity to deliver the project within the service area teams. And by March 2023, this backlog had reached over £12 million, and the PMO was tasked with focused project delivery to reduce the number, get some really good projects progressed. Clearly, delay adds cost, and it frustrates the desire to see infrastructure delivery designed to mitigate the impact of housing. And how often I've heard people say that new housing is problematic because it is not accompanied by infrastructure. And it's this impact that the 106 is supposed to address, but the public are by and large unaware of this. The 106 monies are doing no good if they're not being spent efficiently and sensibly. And we are doing a disservice to local residents and to developers if we are not managing this process well. I'm pleased to report that Andrew and his team, with the work of service areas and PMO, really got to grips with the backlog, and we are seeing some meaningful progress. However, we still have a way to go, and I would ask the committee to consider whether the future plans to deliver are robust enough or whether further action might be needed. I'm also concerned about whether the public awareness of the connection between, say, a new play area and a housing development is sufficiently clear. It might be worthwhile to consider whether some kind of signage would enhance public confidence and also developer buy-in, so both sides can see the value in the 106. And I'd appreciate any thoughts the committee might have on public perception. The report also refers to the 2008 formula, and this begs the question in my mind whether or not that is due for revision. Some areas have revised, but there are other areas that have not. So that's sort of something that might be worth having a think about to make sure that it's fit for the future. It's an exciting time, I think, in the exciting, thrilling world of Section 106, but it is because there's lots of good things happening, and it's really great to see things like classrooms and that being delivered. And there are new things coming down the line. For instance, biodiversity net gain, which I think we're all very enthused by. But how is that going to be delivered? And so I very much look forward to your thoughts and your recommendations on this subject. And I'll do my utmost to answer all the questions, but I will likely have to defer to colleagues where a question is technical or touches on other areas of service delivery. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Councillor Swinglehurst. Ross Cook, you are the lead director, corporate director for economy and environment. Do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, good afternoon, members. I think the detail of the report is before you. Hopefully you've had a chance to read through that, and appreciate the work that the team have done to pull that together. I think, as Councillor Swinglehurst said, there's been great progress in terms of the backlog that we had, but we're really keen to sort of progress that further, so welcome any comments or questions you have.
Great. Thank you very much. And we've got the report authors here, Yvonne Coleman, Planning Obligations Manager, and Andrew Houston, Programme Manager. Would either of you like to contribute anything relating to the report?
I don't think so at this stage, Councillor Chowns. Just happy to respond to any questions that the members have.
Yeah, nothing from me, Chair.
Great. Thank you. We'll give you plenty of chance to respond on substantive things, because we have a bunch of questions. I mean, first of all, I would like to thank you, and I'm sure I speak for all the members of the committee, and thanking you for the work that you've done in preparing this report. In terms of the background to this, we shared with you some questions before Christmas, wasn't it? And we had a pre-briefing a little while ago where we had an opportunity to discuss some of the substance, and really pleased to see that many of the issues that we raised have been addressed in this report. We have a number of questions. We thought we would try to separate them into the sort of policy and prioritisation side of things, and then move on to the practical delivery side of things. So we're going to try and organise our questions in that way, and we'll see how we get along. I mean, if committee members will allow me, I'll kick us off, perhaps, shall I, with the first question, which is it is around the contribution requirements. And Alyssa, I know you kind of touched on this yourself as well. So paragraph 9 talks about the fact that the contribution requirements are set out in the 2008 supplementary planning document SPD on section 106. Now can you confirm that the amounts that developers are required to pay are set in stone from that SPD and have not increased since then?
Thank you, Chair. There are some that have increased. So, as an example, colleagues in education, within the supplementary planning document, there is a line in their section which enables them to uplift values in line with DFE arrangements. So the education contributions have been uplifted. Contributions around the clinical commissioning group and the Wye Valley Trust, they've only very recently set their contributions, because we've only been requesting contributions from them since about 2019. So those figures are up to date. There are other figures that haven't been updated. As an example, the highways contributions haven't been updated, and also the waste contributions. So there are areas within that 2008 document that I would advise need to be updated.
Thank you for the clarification. That's very helpful. So that means that for 16 years, developers have paid exactly the same flat rate in terms of transport contributions. And I took a little time to have a look at that. So in 2024, a developer would have to pay, according to the figures in this report, £2,949 for a two-bed house for transport infrastructure. Have I got that right?
That's correct, Chair.
Yes.
The highway
yes.
figures haven't been updated since 2008.
So it would have been exactly the same
Yes.
16 years ago. Now, in that time, in those past 16 years, the price of an average house in Herefordshire has gone up 50%. I checked the numbers on Rightmove and on the nationwide house price. So in that time, developers are charging half as much again for the properties that they're selling, but we are getting only the same flat rate contribution for transport and for a number of other areas. Why is this? How has this been allowed to happen? How is it that the policy was written in such a way that we didn't, at the very least, specify that these contributions should be index linked?
Sorry, they are index linked, Councillor Chowns. So they're index linked from the point of the date of the agreement to the monies being received. So there is that uplift from the date of the agreement to the monies coming in. It's actually the formula within the SPD that hasn't been updated. So we do get that index linked inflation on top of the contribution, but it's the formulaic approach that hasn't been reviewed.
Thanks. I just want to make sure this is really crystal clear for everybody. So the point that you're making, and it's clarified in Appendix 4, I think it is, the kind of the model example heads of terms you've set. So if we agree a contribution in January 2024, but it's not paid until 2026, then the developer pays the increase, the inflationary increase from 2024 onwards. But the point that I'm really concerned about is that there is no linkage from 2008 all the way up to here, which means that we've lost 50% of the money that we could have had from SPD, from Section 106 contributions, relative to that period 16 years ago, because the policy was written in such a way that we didn't imagine that inflation might be a thing. How did that happen?
So it's not part of my remit, Councillor Chowns, because I'm not a policy reviewer, but I can take a guess that the Planning Obligations Supplementary document was adopted in 2008. The Community Infrastructure Levy regulations came in 2010. And at that point, the council decided to move down the line of the Community Infrastructure Levy. So we would have been adopting a new regime of charges through that legislation. As we moved through that process of adopting the SIL, the government then came in and amended the legislation. So at that point, we stopped progressing on the Community Infrastructure Levy, and we haven't restarted that process.
And that was back in 2016, I think, wasn't it, that we stopped SIL, by which time we'd already lost 8 years of inflation worth uplift in Section 106 contributions. But yeah, we'll leave it at that. I think you can kind of take it as read that this committee will be making a recommendation about the uplift of the contributions. We'll come on to that later, but you've led us on beautifully to SIL, and I know that Ed and possibly others wanted to ask some questions relating to SIL.
Yeah, thank you. I think we were all concerned about the contributions before today, and it's a relatively new administration. I think previous administrations also have been involved and can ask the same question of why this hasn't been looked at since 2008. But I am interested in SIL, and I did. One of the things we did say to you was in our previous meeting is I was particularly interested in how much more we might have received had we adopted SIL 5 years ago when it was paused back in October 2018, to see whether we would be in a better position financially. And I don't know. There was some discussion at our pre-meeting that we might be able to look at those figures. My first question is: have we been able to look at those figures? And do you have any information on the additional money we might have received as opposed to the contributions we got from Section 106, please, Yvonne?
Not in the timescale available for me, Councillor Driscoll, to produce the report, but certainly we can take it as a recommendation.
Okay, thank you. I mean, as I understand it, we're in the process of advertising for an infrastructure delivery officer. Can we take it from the report that looking at SIL and looking at those sort of figures will be one of the key tasks for the new infrastructure delivery officer when they're in post?
So as part of the new local plan, we are producing a viability assessment on that new local plan. And that viability assessment will set new SIL rates for the future. So that will be subject to a public consultation when we go out to consultation in March. So whilst we had the preliminary draft charging schedule back in 2016, we've now, through the new local plan, got a schedule of rates. They're not in the public domain yet because we're not out to consultation, but we will have a new set of SIL rates for everybody to consider as part of that local plan consultation.
And the new local plan consultation, as I understand it, this is kicking off in March 24, supposedly next month?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and this will be part. Will the new infrastructure? What I'm concerned about is the fact that the new infrastructure delivery officer isn't in post yet.
Yeah.
Will they have some responsibility for undertaking this consultation, or was it being done separate to their workload?
The viability assessment is part of the local plan consultation.
Okay.
So that's been done by the strategic policy team. The purpose of the infrastructure delivery officer, and I can see that Paul's on the line. Paul's our interim head of service, and he's actually set up the job application for the infrastructure delivery officer. But the purpose of the infrastructure delivery officer is to pull together a strategy of infrastructure for the whole county. That's not only internally, that's externally as well. So that's going to our partner organisations, so people like Welsh Water or Severn Trent, so that we've got an overall strategy document which says where we're going to deliver that infrastructure in the county.
And is this targeting the backlog? Is that the plan, or?
This is targeting future investment.
Okay.
So where we need our infrastructure in the whole of the county. And also Ross is leading on that with a place board that he's got. So sitting on the place board is all of those service areas that have a responsibility for delivering infrastructure. And that place board, along with the infrastructure delivery officer, will pull together that overall strategy of infrastructure in the county.
And these become the SIL priorities when drawing up the documents?
Yes.
Okay, I understand.
We will then have a strategy document, which we don't have. We have strategies, but we don't have that overall strategy document, which we would be able to use with SIL then to say, these are our priorities for investment, which we can then draw the SIL monies
Will that
against.
make things like the wish list for the parish councils, the Section 106 wish list, will that make it redundant, or will they still be able to feed
Not
into
at
that
all.
process?
The SIL arrangements allow for 25% of the contribution if you have an adopted neighbourhood development plan to go to the parish.
Yeah.
If you don't have an adopted neighbourhood development plan, it enables 15% of the contribution to go to the parish.
Okay.
So your SIL, you have an overall strategic pot, and then you have those two parish pots to devolve to those. So you would still have the opportunity to submit those community wish lists.
From NDPs where they're available, otherwise, yeah. Okay,
I
thank you.
can see Paul's got his hand raised.
Yeah, okay, Paul, and then we've got Bruce and me. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify that point about the infrastructure delivery officer role. So part of the local plan, we also have to submit an infrastructure delivery plan, which sits hand in glove with the local plan. And that document has some standing in the examination process, particularly around delivery of our growth for the first 5 years, which is known as that's known as sort of the deliverable element. And then post five years, it's known as the developable element. That's a slightly technical term, but that's how it's phrased. And the infrastructure delivery plan, which sits alongside the local plan, will highlight the infrastructure that will need to be delivered to support that growth, with a focus on the first 5 years. So hopefully that sort of clarifies that point. And then the other points, as Yvonne has sort of responded to, the other function of that infrastructure delivery officer role will be to pick up on SIL and other related infrastructure delivery opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Bruce, then me, then Ben.
Thank you, Chair. If this community infrastructure levy, which will be called just the infrastructure levy, I understand, if it's introduced, will the money that's been accrued previously under Section 106 be available to spend throughout the county rather than just within the parish?
In effect, no. Each Section 106 agreement is in place to mitigate the impact of a particular development. So the money we have at the moment is set out in a legally binding agreement as to where it has to be spent.
Thanks. Mine's a really small one, but the infrastructure delivery officer that you're talking about sounds very kind of operational job. But actually, when you're explaining it, you're talking about a strategic infrastructure planning role. Just wonder if you might want to consider the job title, really, because it was a cause of some confusion in this room even before you came in about, precisely what this role is going to be doing. Just to follow up, though, in your report, you talk about the infrastructure delivery officer being responsible for updating, the SPD and the 2008 thing. I'm just wondering what the timescales are, because we've identified this is a real issue. We're going to start consultation on the local plan and the infrastructure delivery plan and so forth. That's all going to take quite a long time. Is there not quite an urgent need to at least update the SPD or the numbers in it, like now, even while all the consultation is happening on what exactly is going to be the format of the arrangement going forward?
So we're out to recruitment now on that post. So hopefully we'll have a successful recruitment to that post, and when that post is in place, that will probably be the first responsibility that they'll pick up, is to look at that SPD and see what elements need to be reviewed and the mechanism for the review of that SPD.
Thank you, that's great, because it was third in the list of 3 priorities, so I was a bit worried it wasn't being prioritised, but that's good to hear. Thank you. Ben?
I have a couple of questions, if I can, which are sort of in this area. So one was just a bit of an understanding of how big a job would it be to review that SPD? Because in the report it says it has to be done in accordance with a load of regulations and will require resort. Is that, you know, is it a 3-year task, a 2-month task? What sort of scale of work are we talking about?
So to review the SPD, it will obviously be subject to some form of community consultation, because we couldn't just update the figures. So there is a process that we would need to go through. As I say, I'm not a policy officer, Councillor Proctor. So I don't know if Paul, you want to come in there on the review of the SPD?
Yeah, so so the start of the process really will be sort of almost like a twin process where we'll be looking at the infrastructure delivery in support of the local plan, but also at the same time reflecting back on where we are in relation to the current arrangements. So there could well be, depending to consultation responses and direction of travel around the local plan as well, there could be sort of some interim arrangements that could take place to step in to sort of plug that gap, if you like. You know, it's in terms of direction of travel for a formal process to a a brand spanking new SPD. I would be suggesting that would follow after after we've got past the local plan process. So that could be some time down the road, but there could be an interim arrangement in between.
Just my other question was slightly more political, which is what is the feeling within the cabinet about the direction of travel in terms of Section 106 infrastructure levy? What do you favour going forward?
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. There hasn't been a specific discussion within cabinet. I think after today, you know, taking the recommendations, it would give us a really good opportunity to have that discussion along with the discussion over the recommendations and the way in which we want to progress this. So watch this space. I think will be you know, this can be the springboard for that discussion. Thank you.
Excellent politician's answer, Councillor Swinglehurst. I'm not sure that this committee is going to be in a position to kind of make any recommendations regarding SIL, for example, because we're not actually at the point of consultation and haven't been provided with any information to enable us to make comparisons, but still. I've got hands from Ed and Frank and Richard.
Just following on, if it's possible to have interim arrangements, those are 2 very important words that sound extremely useful while we're looking at the SIL. And it's a shame we haven't been able to have potentially interim arrangements previously, because we could have been bringing in hopefully a little bit more money in Section 106. So yeah, I would certainly explore those interim arrangements as soon as possible. That'd be one recommendation I'm going to suggest.
That's great. If you make that recommendation, that'd be very welcome. Thank you.
So one question I had was, how long does the 106 money last? How quickly does it have to be spent from the day that it's allocated to a task? If I start there,
It's individual to each agreement, but our starting point is 10 years.
Okay, thank you. And I was looking at the appendix where you've listed all the projects that have been done. Of course, we don't know what each of those projects has come off against. I wondered if there was a way so that we could, like, almost audit the 106s, so that you know, right, when, say for example, a development was giving £1 million to 106s, and you had a list of all the projects that was going to do, and some of that obviously went to education. When that had been allocated to a specific project within that area, we would know then, right, well, actually there was 750,000 allocated to that education, and we spent 20,000 there, then there's still the 730. So that we're fully aware of how much more money is to be spent in each of the areas. Is there any way that we could be fed with that information?
So we currently have that information on the planning obligation search facility. So on the council's website, there's a planning obligation search facility that you can go in and you can search on monies available. So that's what we've got in the council pot. Monies pending. So those are monies that we have asked a developer to pay. And also the sites that are currently under construction, which I'm monitoring the trigger points for payment. If you were to search on a development site and choose the monies available option, it will give you monies available and the balance. So it will show you on that search facility what has been spent, in effect.
Can I just follow up on that a moment, Yvonne? I mean, is that kind of real time, like updated every week with new invoices kind of thing? So it's...
Yeah, so I have a planning obligation support officer, and part of her role is to update that on a spreadsheet that we have that is linked to the website. So every time we have a payment, that spreadsheet is updated and is uploaded onto the website.
And I get the impression that what Frank is asking for is kind of, you know, that you could press a button and get a bar chart that would say we're kind of 60% of the way through spending the money from this development. Would that be an easy kind of bell and whistle to add to it?
You can export the information that's produced. So the information that's produced on the website, you can export into an Excel spreadsheet and you can produce graphs.
I'm not sure all users are comfortable. I'd be really happy doing that, but I can't guarantee that all members of this committee, let alone all residents, would be able to do that. So that's why I'm suggesting the button pressing thing.
I suppose there's another way in that we have a draft delivery page. So it's a page that Andrew is working on the website, and whether on that we can do a bar chart of delivery for each project and publish that on there. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Yvonne. Yeah, I resonate with Councillor Cornthwaite's point. I think the search facility gives you, let's say, 700,000, as you say, and there's complexities then as to how that's broken down. Obviously, highways and transport might be one project. Education, for example, can be a number of projects. They are split between primary, secondary, youth allocations, post-16, for example, SEN. So you can have a number of different projects. I think what we're getting at is you can clearly see what monies you have left, but assigned to which projects. And I think we could be better at that. As Yvonne said, we're currently updating another section of the website where we want to be very clear as to what projects are coming forward in each of the gain types to allow that kind of firmer understanding of a wider sense. So you can clearly understand how much money is in progress from that section 106. The other thing I would say in the short term, while that's being developed, is close engagement with my team. Greg Speller on highways and transport, myself on education and sports, and Jen Hilton-Trout on offsite play. The more we communicate, the better your understanding will be as to where we are with plan delivery and the plan spend.
Just to clarify, that would be against each of the 106s. So we would see that on a 106 project that was within a specific ward, because that's where the money had come from, rather than everything that was being spent on education within the 106 thing. We would see it broken down to the specific areas.
I think we'd need to agree the complexities of it. Obviously, the backlog and the variety of parishes and wards can
can mean it could take quite a bit of an administration to update. I see no reason why we can't do it. I think this is the, as Councillor Swingle has mentioned, springboard to agree what that could look like and how that would best benefit its users in members. So I think that's to be agreed from here.
Thank you. I'm aware we're veering into implementation rather than policy, but never mind, such is life. That's fine. Richard, you were next, and then Ed.
Just go back a little bit to what you said about, I'm a bit concerned at this disparity between parishes that have their plan, local plan, and parishes that don't. Because the parishes that don't, I don't know how many there left, but there are a few. I've certainly got one in my ward, if not two. So I can't quite see why there should be a big differential. The second thing is that you mentioned a figure of 25%. Is that 25% in control, sole control of the parish council, or so who is in control of the other 75%, please?
So that proportional split between the parishes is set by government. That's part of the legislation, that's part of the community infrastructure levy legislation, so it's not set locally. In terms of control, the 75% would come to the council to administer, the 25% or the 15% would go to the parishes to administer, and there would be a requirement from them on an annual basis to publish on their website where they've spent that money, so that there's audit purposes for that.
Well, I've got one parish, Kingston, who were awarded 484,000, I think, who seem to be spending most of it on a road scheme. Is that because it's generally been agreed? Yes,
Councillor
generally been agreed with the council and the local parish, or?
Councillor Thomas, just to clarify, the 75%, 25% split is under community infrastructure levy, which we don't have. We have section 106, so that is a hypothetical that it's a system that we might move to, but we don't. So if I think it's best if we avoid addressing specific ward-specific issues, but if there's something you'd like to follow up with about that, I'm sure Greg Speller is the person to talk to about that particular project. Great, thank you. Ed, you had a question, and I'm keen to move on through our long list of
Yeah,
questions.
I mean, I'm not sure. Again, it's difficult because one question leads into another, and I'm sorry if I am straying into other areas, but it was following on what Frank was saying about the 10 year in the contract, the 10 years in the contract. There's a 15 million we've taken in since 2019. I'm guessing there's probably some money that predates 2019, possibly still in the council coffers. My question is there any money currently at risk of being paid back to developers that we currently hold?
Thanks. In terms of historically, that was a very big challenge. The potential of Herefordshire Council having to return monies to developers because of it hitting that 10-year timescale was significant. Somewhere in, I think, I'm off the top of my head here, but to the 800, 900,000 mark. We did work ourselves, between ourselves and planning. We also, I'm not getting into the details of delivery here, but the fact those projects were formally commissioned during set timescales allows the use of those monies. We have returned from a potential of nearly £1 million, we have ended up returning something like £7,000. So the fact there has been process changes, we've looked at.
Sorry, in what period? In what period is that? Sorry.
Good question. I think at the time of review, the start of last year, let's say, there was a potential that Section 106 agreements, could validly be returned if we didn't ensure that those projects were commissioned, and we had the necessary documentation to show that they'd been allocated, but they'd been delayed by COVID, pandemic, something of that nature. After that significant review, looking at the back of house documentation, working with our service areas, that risk came down to almost zero. And as I say, to date, we've returned £6,000. So to answer the question plainly, no, we are not at risk at this present
We're not
moment
currently,
in time.
okay, good. Because I was asked by a question by a councillor who said that there was some money that they were aware of for not a specific project, but in the Ross-on-White area that had been returned in the recent past that we would never see again. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know specifically. Like I said, we returned some highways and transport monies, totaling about £7,000. Out of the grand scheme of things, it had to be returned based on assessment. Yes, you could hold your hands up and say, why wasn't it delivered in that period? But in those circumstances, those monies technically need to be returned. And also bear in mind that developers are getting smarter, requesting monies back based on their expiry dates. So yes, that may have been the case. I would have to look at the specifics of that one to answer that. But yeah, I do believe, like I said, there has been a return of some monies, but they are marginal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Yvonne, you previously confirmed that the time span is normally 10 years that we've got to have it. So that would have been £7,000 that had been around for 10 years, something like that. Yeah.
Yes, it would.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to pull us back to, if you could turn off your mic. Thanks, Ed. I'm going to pull us back to the list of questions that we previously had. Now, we were talking about viability. Ben, you had wanted to ask a question relating to viability.
Well, I suppose I suppose this is really a question about how do we know that the service is being effective. So, as I think in the briefing you said that we've only had 2 situations where developers have come forward and said that the 106 would be economically unviable. But I'm interested in whether that's good or bad. Like, if should we be working harder and then seeing more developers kind of screaming because because we're trying to get as much money from them, or is it a bad sign that even 2 developers have? Do we have any sense of how we can judge whether we're sort of setting our obligations at the most sort of efficient level?
So there's a couple of things there. One, again, is the local plan viability assessment. As part of that work, they are actually looking at the planning obligations, contributions that we have in doing that assessment. You're right, Councillor Proctor, in our briefing, I said at the moment we've only got 2 viability assessments or planning applications with viability assessments. They're few and far between. If we look to uplift our figures in the planning obligations supplementary planning document, that's when we get more approaches from developers to say it's not viable, we can't afford your contributions and we can't afford the level of affordable housing. So at the moment, the figures that are set in the planning obligations, developers are paying and they're delivering the level of affordable housing that we need. If we uplift those figures in the SPD, it is likely that we will get more challenges in terms of viability, and there we will potentially miss out on contributions and the level of affordable housing that we need. All of those assessments are undertaken independently, as I think I said at our briefing. So when a developer does submit a viability assessment, we instruct the district valuer, which is a government-based body, to actually undertake that assessment. So they would drill down on the assessment itself and see whether they concur with what's being said. So that there is that risk in updating those figures that we will get more viability arguments put forward.
Can I, again, I guess there's then a political question about what would be the Cabinet's appetite for that risk versus reward?
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. I mean, I think I think it's actually very difficult because there comes a point, you know, this phrase about, you know, would you say make developers scream? I don't think that's a good thing, because actually we need people to bring economic growth and homes and to invest in the county. So, you know, if we make them scream, they're likely to go invest somewhere else, I would have thought. So it's a delicate balance, given that they're also expected to make contributions not only to affordable housing but also now biodiversity net gain and on and off-site provision, carbon. We want to see homes being built highest possible standard of energy efficiency, and all these things chip away at the bottom line. And we do have a lot of, you know, whilst we have got some sort of major developers in the county, we have a lot of SME developers. So we have to be careful that we don't make life so difficult for them that they cease to be able to employ people and build homes. Certainly with the phosphates issue in the Luggers, so that's driven some of them to the brink. So, you know, it's not, it's, you know, I think viability is something that we have to be very serious about and very careful over, and that's why we do assessments and try to be fair, because we do still want to see housing delivery. We need to see homes being built for people. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I get the sense from that response that you would be quite risk averse in terms of trying to rapidly increase costs. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd be very, very careful because it's multifactorial. You know, you've got, you know, just from the point of view of, you know, the cost of building a house is the cost of building a house, more or less. Whether or not you're building a house in somewhere where property prices are extremely high, or whether you're building that house where property prices are not so high. And therefore, the viability of building that property is somewhat variable, and we have to be aware and cognizant of that if we don't want to lose the industry, the skills, the jobs, the economic investments, and all the rest of it. So I don't think it's being risk averse so much as just being cautious and looking at it in the whole through all these kind of multifactorial lenses of land values and wanting, and we know what the housing that we want to see delivered, and we don't want to then prejudice that by being unreasonable over contributions. But the balance is assessed, so it's not exactly sort of sticking a finger in the wind. It's you know, it is assessed, and we would look at it through that lens.
I can see Paul McKinn wants to come in, and Ed as well. You're on mute, Paul.
Thanks for that. Thanks. Just to sort of just add a bit of colour to that conversation, actually. In terms of the valuation office, I just want to advise members that the valuation office only works with the public sector. It doesn't work with the private sector. So my experience in other places is, you know, you have you know, private sector valuers working for a local authority, and then maybe 6 months, 10 months down the line, they come back in and they're advising a developer. You know, we don't have that because we use the valuation offices, and that's a really important point, I think. And then secondly, just from my experience, when you do get into the discussions around viability with developers, it is inevitably affordable housing that takes the hit, particularly social rented housing, because all other costs tend to be fixed. You know, cost of a road is a road, cost of a school is a school. It's that the variable then becomes the affordable housing. So if you do take a hit on viability, it invariably comes off that affordable housing schedule. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. Just following up on what Ben said, Councillor Swinglehurst. Well, yes, we don't want to put off developers. Just to confirm, you are very keen that we should review the SPD and we should be looking at interim arrangements. And yes, we don't want people screaming in pain, but at the same time, we don't want them laughing either, do we?
Quite correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Otherwise, effectively, we end up with Herefordshire taxpayers all over the place subsidising the increased cost of construction of, you know, works that are necessary to make a development acceptable in planning terms. I would like to move on to the question of community involvement in setting the things that Section 106 contributions are spent on. this is covered a little bit in the report, and you draw attention in paragraph 13 to the community wish lists. It's good that that exists, but this information is published as a static PDF with extremely tiny writing, really tiny writing. And I wonder if it's possible for it to be embedded in the website in the same way as the Section 106 contributions database is embedded, which is much more user-friendly, can be exported to Excel so that people can make their charts and so forth. But, you know, to be able to have it much more accessible and searchable. So that's question number one. Can that please be put in there? Question number two is, I think the wish list is clearly out of date from what I know of community wish lists just in my ward, not to get into specifics, but that information is not there on the wish list, and yet it is the subject of very intensive conversations and active Section 106 processes at the moment, and was previously. And the other thing is that that list includes requests that date back many years, in one case to 2011. So it does seem that there's an urgent need to update the list. So can you comment on that, please? And can you also please comment on whether there is more that can and should be done to actively solicit community involvement in specifying the things that they would like to wish for in their communities? I think we send an email out once a year, but you know, it seems clear that there is, to me, that there is space there for a greater role in community engagement, because otherwise you end up with this situation where communities feel, oh, you know, this is all being done, where's the infrastructure that goes with it? And going back to the point that you made, Councillor Swinglehurst, right at the beginning about public understanding and buy-in, I think a clearer understanding of that process would go a long way to alleviating that issue. I don't know who's best placed to respond to that. Is it you, Yvonne? Sorry, you're on the spot a lot, or somebody else?
No, I can respond, Councillor Chowns. Yeah, you're quite correct. The Section 106 wish list is a static document on the website, and it has got very small writing. I concur with you. I don't see any reason why we can't take it away as a recommendation that we look to format it in the same format as the Section 106 search facility. It is an annual update, so we write out to the parishes annually and ask them to submit their wish lists. As part of the next letter, we are having an additional section on delivery in there, so we can give them an update on the delivery mechanism that we're now working to provide them with the delivery email address. In terms of working with community, we are now actively involving Talk Community, so we are inviting them along to the meetings when we meet with the community or with parishes, because our understanding is that they have the knowledge on the ground. They have community development officers appointed to each of the areas of the county, so we are inviting them along to have those meetings. We'll always try and work with community. I know Ross at the moment, they're out to application for a community development officer, so we would always engage with people like that in getting the ideas and the projects. Your comment about a project being on there from 2011, it might be on there from 2011 because it hasn't actually been delivered. So it would need to stay on there, and that might be for many reasons. If that is a desire and it's actually a brand new community building, well, actually the funding mechanisms to get the money for that means that it potentially hasn't been delivered since 2011. But if you've got any ideas or recommendations of updating that wish list process, if you think it should go out on a 6-monthly basis rather than an annual basis, then I welcome the committee's input on that.
Thank you. I can see Ed's hand, but just before, can I ask, when you write out to the parish councils, do you say to them each individually, look, in your area, you've got £52,781 of education amount available from this development, you know, 7,000 blah, blah for open space. Do you give them the specific amounts that they've got? Because I think that would really concentrate minds. The difference between a generic email that says, hey guys, got any wish lists, and another one that says, in your area, because of development X, there is this amount of thousands and thousands of pounds available for within these constraints. We're going to spend it on stuff, and we'd like you to tell us what your priorities are. I think that would go an immense way to concentrating minds and really generating the engagement from the communities.
I think there's two things. We don't set out the money that's available in their parishes because that may have already been committed, but we can review that. But what's important is we need to know what future community infrastructure we need, because that's what's informing the heads of terms of planning applications that are being submitted. So we do need that future look of what they want within their parishes, but we could look to also include that element of this is the money in your parish. What would you like it spent on?
Thanks, Yvonne. And I've seen your hands. Yeah, that's a really good point about we want the parishes to look even further forward than just there's this pot of money, because like you say, these things take a long time scale, and you sign a heads of terms and then something's set in stone. You need the input even before then. Mm-hmm. You and I know, and I'm sure lots of other councillors know, that it is hard to get parish councils to really concentrate minds and think that far forward and think hypothetically about what infrastructure is needed. What have you found works well? Are there particular, I'm not asking you to name names of parishes, but what has worked well in terms of the Herefordshire Council's engagement with parishes to generate that sort of long-term thinking and wish list that has then been demonstrated to be translated into Section 106 funded projects?
I suppose what's worked well is the preparation of the neighbourhood development plans, because that has concentrated minds to actually identify those infrastructure projects that are needed in those areas. And we've got 93 of those adopted now, so that's a good process of getting that discussion going on what the community infrastructure needs are. We do have some very proactive parishes with their wish lists that have submitted and delivered. So there are some good examples. What we haven't done previously in the letter that we've sent out is given them a pro forma to fill in. So in this next letter that's going out, we're giving them a pro forma to actually get them thinking. So it's not just a generic, we need a road scheme in the village, we need a bit of open space. That pro forma will actually get them to put in detail what they need now and for the future development of their village and their community.
Thank you. I can see a lot of hands. We've got Paul online and we've got some councillors here. Paul, is it directly following on from what Yvonne was saying?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Go for it.
So just to again add a little bit of colour for that, horizon scanning. We've got the Reg 18 local plan process, and that will be identifying infrastructure requirements going forward and asking for views and opinions as part of that process, and that's going to be quite an intense process. And Yvonne's mentioned neighbourhood plans. We're a leading authority on neighbourhood plans. 93 neighbourhood plans at 134 parish councils. There's no other authority in the country that matches that amount of neighbourhood planning and the engagement that goes with that. So it's a really good way of getting that feedback in and getting the local community involved in the planning of their area. Thank you.
Thank you. Although I think there's a question about whether and how things get transferred from the NDP into the Section 106 wish list. That doesn't happen automatically, does that?
So the Section 106 wish lists are what the community or the parish or the community have identified. What I do in drawing up the heads of terms for each planning application is refer to each NDP in that area. So I pull out the information from the NDP to go into the draft heads of terms where that community infrastructures. So what we don't do is take everything out of an NDP and put it into the Section 106 parish wish list. There's a separate side for that. The parish council wish list have been submitted by those parishes and communities.
Thanks, Yvonne. That's really clear. Appreciated. Right, I've got Ed Ben, Richard, Frank, Bruce. Come on, Elizabeth, you got something to add?
Full house.
To have a full house.
Right. Following on, wish lists. Now, you know, when we had our online meetings, this was something I was quite interested in, and you know, the fact they're published online is great. And what you've said to us now about the pro forma and getting more detail from the councils around the wish list is all very well and good, but it's a two-way street. And I think the feedback we give councils on their wish lists is more important, because I think where a lot of frustration comes from with parish councillors, with clerks, etc., is they prepare the wish lists, it's all submitted, and if their requests are unrealistic, we're not telling them. We need to feed back. We need to say, well, okay, well, this isn't going to be covered by Section 106. It's not realistic. It's not going to happen. Is there something else, or let's take that out? And the stuff that's on the wish list that is never going to happen, I looked through that PDF. We could take a red pen to quite a few of those and cross them out and just say, get real. That's never going to happen in a million years. There's never going to be enough housing development unless we, you know, to cover the costs of some of these. So I think that would go a long way towards allaying a lot of the concerns and misconceptions of how Section 106 money is spent, especially at parish level, if we actively feed back. And I think, following on from what Councillor Chown said, a living document online rather than just a small PDF, which is updated when people put on their requests, and maybe a parish council can put on a request, and then within a week you can say, get real, this isn't going to happen, and it can be taken down. And then all of a sudden you're going to have a much better set of priorities to work from. And the other thing is councillor consultation. I know some councillors are concerned that we say we consult with county councillors, and that planning consults with county councillors about Section 106 contributions. How much do we feel that is currently happening, and can we involve councillors more, I think, in putting forward what they see as priorities as well for Section 106 money, at least having more of that conversation? And do you think we're consulting with councillors enough around Section 106, please? So there's a lot there. Firstly, do you agree with my ideas around the wish list, and how can we consult with councillors better?
Thanks. I'm not going to answer the whole portion of the question. There's a bit on delivery there, but the portion about wish list it's really it's a really good point. I think, you know, if you ask for a Ferrari and you can afford a Fiat, then, you know, there's some reasonability around what we're choosing. But I think the focus needs to be on, as Councillor Chowns has said, you know, how do we anticipate the future? And I think that's best drawn out by understanding what the problem is. I think we can go a little bit too far sometimes as to maybe, you know, moving away from what the problem is. My colleague Greg, I've stolen his words, but he says it on highways and transport. He's like, tell me the problem and I'll put the thing in that resolves it. And I think that's where the wish list could maybe help a little bit, is more focusing on what the problem is now and what the future, you know, impacts may be.
I think that's a really good idea.
That's
really
only a general comment, because we can go so far down the line with, I love, you know, when people get involved and excited about projects. My role in delivery is about seeing something on the ground, and that's what gets us excited. But at the same time, statutory requirements are statutory requirements. So when it comes to design, it needs to be informed by the TS, RGD, etc., and standards. So, you know, what's the problem? And then we make sure it fits to the guidelines from there. So that was just a general point on when addressing consultation. And the other bit is, I think, in my experience, consultations within the local community have varied. There's a document that myself and my colleague Ruth Jackson use as a gold plate on Weston and Penyard parish from a long time ago, which was a really good piece of consultation. I think every parish is different as to how they communicate with their local parishioners. So certainly, what is best practice? What is a good way to do it? What is the modern way of doing it, and what suits the local need? And certainly, I think some elements of sharing on how's a good way to consult with parishes. considering we get some really good consultation that's out there for Section 106 as well. It's just a general point that you know, we could get some consistency and taking advantage of modern aspects of things. But yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Andrew. Just to be a bit cautious there about what Andrew said, when we say what is the problem, Section 106 can't remedy existing deficiencies. We can't use it to remedy an issue that's already occurring in a parish. That's there. It is for new infrastructure. So just to be cautious then, that if we use that in the Section 106 letter that goes out, that yeah, we'd have to be cautious on that. Feedback on the wish lists, yes, I think it's a good idea. Yeah, to get them into shape, get them deliverable, ultimately. How do we engage with parishes? There's a useful document at Appendix 7 of the report that gives you...
With councillors, I think it was more specifically.
Is it councillors?
Yeah.
Sorry. So with councillors, the Constitution requires us to contact you. There are two elements within the Constitution when a planning application is submitted, that the case officer will contact you when the application comes in to let you know that it requires a Section 106 agreement, and that is for major developments of 11 or more units. There are some others. There are some around some of our quarry developments or our biogas developments which don't trigger that threshold, but which mean that it's a major application, so we need to be in contact with you. So there's that first point of contact from the case officer. The second point is when we have the draft heads of terms. So at that first point, you can come to us and say, or come to the case officer and say, right, I know the community needs this. The second point is we share with you the draft heads of terms. And you can then come back on those draft heads of terms and say, well, I know that the community needs this. Can you consider it as part of the heads of terms?
Okay. Thank you.
Ben, we'll just go along the lot.
Two questions, I think. Just one is kind of following on that discussion. So I'm interested in this. There's a sort of, it sounds like there's a continuum between stuff that a parish might like and stuff that could reasonably be delivered in a Section 106. The Section 106 would be the mechanism for delivery. And it sounds, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like a neighbourhood development plan is a really good way of sort of encompassing all of that, which is why we like neighbourhood development plans. And so, is it desirable to have a wish list which is a wish list for infrastructure, or is it better to keep it very Section 106 focused? Is I guess my first question.
Sorry, if I'm understanding you, Councillor Proctor, are you asking whether the neighbourhood development plans have an overall infrastructure?
Well, I'm guessing. I'm kind of saying from a parish point of view, there's a load of stuff that I might want. Only some of those that a parish might want or need. Only some of those things are appropriate for delivery in 106.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I think we say, give us, the wish list is very specifically about things that could be delivered as 106 agreements. But actually, as a parish, I probably don't care what the delivery mechanism is. I just, and I think that neighbourhood development plans are a good mechanism for that kind of wider, this is what we want, however it is delivered. But what do we do in it? What do we do in areas which don't have neighbourhood development plans? Their citizens appear to be missing out on that opportunity, I guess.
Yes, we wouldn't have an infrastructure requirement on an area that doesn't have an NDP, but what we would have in response to the planning application is the consultation responses, which then identifies, or people can identify, what infrastructure they require as a result of the development. So there's another avenue You've got your NDPs where they've actually identified it, where you haven't got an NDP as part of the planning application. The consultation template at the bottom of it has an element which says Section 106 infrastructure requirements. So anybody commenting on a planning application can put those requests in. And what we always say that even if you object to a planning application, please put in the infrastructure requirements that you would like to see delivered, because the council might be minded to take a different view on that planning application, and so we want to take those infrastructure requests into account.
Thank you. And I guess following up on that, the most obvious gap in terms of neighbourhood development plans is Hereford City, and that's a third of the population, but it doesn't have a neighbourhood development plan. And it also, and obviously I am a city councillor as well, so, but I might argue that the city needs special arrangements because it's a very different sort of parish. I mean, all parishes are different, but it's orders of magnitude larger than any other parish. So this is a kind of a policy question, I guess. So should the city have special arrangements, and should the council be doing more, the county be doing more to incentivise the last parishes to get into the neighbourhood development planning game?
Roger Allenby.
Thanks, Councillor Chance. I think that there's a slightly broader question than just the planning process around how then we're delivering kind of infrastructure and the future development of the county in and around the city. So the local plan review will look at the needs of the city as an employment hub and housing hub for the county. The planned city centre master plan will look at the kind of the infrastructure challenges and needs for the city and the wider county. The economic plan already starts to set out some of those infrastructure requirements. So there's a Section 106 will be an answer to delivering some of those requirements now. The infrastructure levy and the plan associated with so the infrastructure strategy, in effect, demonstrates how we'll deliver the local plan. So without a clear plan for how we're delivering the infrastructure across the county, including in the city, the local plan will not be adopted through the inspection process. So there are other avenues in and around how the local plan's developed now, where the strategy documents are developed that will look at the county to fill the gaps. It's not just reliant on the 106 process in order to do that. And I think the movement towards SIL or IL will also help prioritise where some of that investment goes, particularly in the bigger kind of Hereford conurbation.
Thank you. Councillor Singlehurst.
Thank you. I can't believe they've come up with the acronym IL. Just for good or ill. You can just imagine. It's going to be great, isn't it? But I mean, I think about what Councillor Proctor is saying, and I can see no reason, and would be quite happy to take it away as a recommendation to think it through more deeply, that where there is no NDP, that parishes both large and small have the ability to write their infrastructure requirements or wish list, and have that incorporated, or at least, you know, given due regard to in the process, so that they aren't silent on that, because actually I think that sort of local input is really important.
Thank you. Okay. Elizabeth, moving on. Is this all still on community involvement, these questions? Yep, great.
Could we have a degree of flexibility with Section 106 money? Because maybe what was desirable, say 5 years ago, might not be so relevant 5 years later or 10 years later.
We try to be as flexible as we can, but we are bound by statutory tests. So if you look at the report, I've set out those statutory tests at paragraph 6 of the report. So whilst we try to be as flexible as possible, we do have to make sure that the obligations in the legal agreement that is signed comply with those 3 statutory tests. So we can't be as open and just say it's a highway scheme. We have to put in more detail to be able to comply with those statutory tests.
Richard.
13A, In the case of a major planning application, the case of identify the ward member. Now, very early on, Greg came telephone call to me, and about one-eye parishes, won't name specific one, but he seemed very surprised when I said, well, every email you please when you send to the parish, will you copy me in? He was very, very surprised. And he actually said, well, the ward member is not normally involved. But this is stating, are we talking about a wish list or futuristic? Is this the plan which will be, or is that obligation in now?
So what's set out at paragraph 13 is from the council constitution, and that's when a planning application is submitted. So when we get a planning application, we have a responsibility to contact the ward member where there is a section 106 agreement in place. You're talking about delivery, so that's a separate area.
Yeah, we have a ward for ward member first approach. So working, there's a lot of you around the room who we've spoken to first. If it's a small project and you're happy for us to work with the parishes, then we link with them. There is no reason for that thought that ward members aren't involved. They're a key part of the process in terms of delivery. So the bit you mentioned before was front end. When it comes to delivery and what we've got on, we work with our ward members or through them into the parishes for those discussions. So there will be no surprise that we involve members.
I'm following on from this really is the fact if I wasn't up to date with what's going on in my ward, I could have a very embarrassing parish council meeting when they're looking to me for answers, and I'm afraid I can't give it. So all ward councillors will be kept informed then of a progress of 106.
Correct. Greg's part of my team, and he is from the highways. He's working on the backlog of the highways projects. So the fact he's spoken to you means he's doing what he should be. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Again, we're drifting into delivery. We're just about to have our 10-minute halfway break, and then we will move into delivery questions after that time. Frank and Bruce, do you have questions on consultation?
Because I think mine is more about...
Yours, okay, you can come first off when we come back to that. Bruce, you want to go back to viability? Crack on. Yes. It's a policy question. Can you put on your mic, Bruce?
I'm sorry. A very small one. Any plans when the project management officer, it's a contract, isn't there? Aren't you on contract or something to be renewed, or I've got the wrong end of the stick?
That is a delivery. If it's about the PMO team, yeah. That is a question relating to delivery capacity, which we will come to after the break.
Right. The other question then, oh gosh, I've lost it. On paragraph 4, there's a mention of the NPPF, and it states that local planning authorities should consider whether otherwise unacceptable development could be made acceptable through the use of planning obligations. And I'm wondering whether we can turn that on its head, in so much that if a previously acceptable development could be considered unacceptable if planning obligations such as 106 agreements are not agreed, or is that something that's out of our hands?
That's national policy, Councillor Baker, so we wouldn't be able to change no, we can't change national policy.
Right, and midway break alarm has gone off, but Ed, Ben, you've got a quick policy question?
It's not really a question, just it's an observation for the committee. So this is not the first time that relationships between the county and town and parish have come up in our findings, and I feel like it might be something that we want to put in our work plan to look at in the round. That's all.
That sounds like a wide topic, Ben. I'll leave you to frame a suggestion for our work plan planning meeting, shall I?
Me too.
Okie doke. Right, we're going to take a 10-minute comfort break and we'll come back in precisely 10 minutes from now. Thanks, everybody. Lovely. I'm glad the live stream is started up again. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good break. Right, we are going to crack on. And just to let you know, I have set an alarm for 4:40. This meeting normally goes on till 5. We may as well use the time we've got if we've got it. I've set an alarm for 4:40, so that'll give us a little time to go into a short private session just to make sure that we've got our recommendations sorted and bring them all back together, aiming to finish at 5. Hope that sounds okay with everybody. So that gives us a little over an hour to cover delivery, some of which we've already covered. But before we move on to delivery, I understand that, Ed, you have got one more policy-related question you'd like to cover.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's something we meant to mention earlier. I understand that according to the SPD, there is a provision for a contribution for youth services. But that since youth services was effectively abolished around 2013, and there was nobody really at the table banging the drum for youth services, that money's gone to other services instead, or hasn't been charged. Can I have some clarity around what's happened to youth services money, please?
Yeah, it'd be for colleagues on the virtual, for Quentin me to respond.
Okay, so yeah, it comes with the remit of the educational section 106. So we try and identify projects that would obviously look at that age group and try and help. We've spoke to yourself recently about the skate park in Ross. That would be the sort of projects would fund from that.
But is it correct that, you know, since 2013, the majority of money has just gone to schools rather than youth clubs?
It can't do that. It has to be spent on youth projects, or at least those that are targeting the kids aged 13 to 19. So no, that's not true.
So but has there been a separate clause in the contracts for youth provision for youth services, or since 2013?
No, the money we still get. Sorry, I'll hand over to Karen. She's more wise counsel on this. So, but no is the answer. But once I'll pass to Karen.
Yeah, thank you. There was a period of time where we didn't actually request a youth contribution, but that is now lapsed, and we are now requesting youth contributions where we can for all education contributions from developments. So it is a separate allocation, although you'll see in the SPD there's a specific amount that we request per house type, so 2-bed, 3-bed, 4-bed plus. But it's actually split, like Andrew alluded to earlier, into the various different elements. So we have an early years, primary, secondary, post-16, SEN and youth allocations, and they are specific to that particular area of work. So the youth monies will only be spent on youth projects. They won't be spent anywhere else.
That's great. But just for clarity, there were a number of years when the contracts didn't include any provision for youth services. Do you know how many years that was, Karen, please?
Not off the top of my head, but I would say 3 or 4, possibly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we will move on to questions relating specifically to delivery now. And Frank, I promised to give you first dibs on delivery. Do you want to come on with your question, I think, about the PMO? Or anything else you care to tackle?
I think, well, basically it was about the neighbourhood development plan, because I wanted to know what percentage of the neighbourhood development plan was actually taken into consideration when you were working everything out. And I don't specifically want to relate to the one that's in my own ward, but it did seem that quite a chunk of the neighbourhood development plan was ignored on the latest big development in my ward. And could I just ask, I didn't know what SPD stood for, and we're trying to not have acronyms, so that's not your question.
I consider my wrist slapped on the SPD thing. Thank you very much, Frank. Supplementary planning document. And for those that have been watching since the beginning, we keep talking about SIL, which is Community Infrastructure Levy. So good reminder to us all to avoid acronyms if we can. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Cornthwaite, was that a specific question on a particular planning application in your ward?
Well, I would want to avoid a specific one. So I was just asking what percent would you reckon you took notice of the neighbourhood development plan that a lot of parishes have spent, as you said, 93 out of 134, spent a lot of time putting those together. And then if a particular parish finds that a large chunk of that's just been ignored because it's a big development, how much of it do you actually think what percentage of it do you take note of?
We'd have regard to the whole content of the neighbourhood development plan in drawing up the heads of terms. But if you've got specifics, I'm happy to discuss that with you if it relates to a particular planning application.
Later.
Yes.
Yes, let's definitely keep ward matters out of this meeting and stick to questions of kind of policy and general practice. Thank you. Frank, I thought you were moving towards asking a question about the PMO and the management. Was that you, Bruce? I do apologise. Please crack on.
If I understand it right, the project management office was formed to deal with the backlog of monies? No?
I don't. Sorry, thank you. The project management office has been in existence. I don't know how long. That's my colleagues.
20, I think.
Yeah, will be able to answer that. Within the PMO, which is obviously wider project management, our specific Section 106 team has been put into place within that using the existing resource and a specific team to manage this delivery.
Okay, fine, fair enough. I'm just wondering, in the future, we've got a lot of money still not spent.
Yep.
And there will be more money coming in on a regular basis.
Yep.
And do we have a plan to deal with any future backlog or to prevent any future backlog?
So, our team within the Section 106 Project Management Office are fundamentally dealing with the backlog of projects. Our remit or delegated authority has been set out in the Cabinet Report of March 2023. In regards to future monies coming in, that is a further conversation, sorry, not with myself, but maybe a series for a recommendation as to be discussed. Ultimately, the history is that the responsibility lays with the service area to deliver these projects. The PMO came in to help with the backlog of projects. We are still in the midst of that journey in terms of what's next and in the future. That's to be follow on discussion, but I myself don't have the answers.
Thank you. I can see that Alyssa and Ross want to come in on this, and I was going to bring you in anyway, Ross. So, Alyssa, do you want to go first then?
Yes, I was going to thank Councillor Baker for raising this. So it's my understanding that the work that Andrew and his team have done, along with the service areas, has been addressing that £12 million needs to be spent. There's about a year, I think, that's going to go on that, and then what happens next? So. Does it all sit with the service areas? Is there the capacity? These are the sort of questions that I think we need to have a good look at, and defer to Ross for further details.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. So I think, taking the conversation back, and it predates when I joined the council, I think it was always sort of traditionally seen as a Section 106 was a planning issue. And I think we've sort of changed our approach in that whilst it comes through that planning process, the ownership of the delivery sits within each of the services, and it's key to make sure that that's delivered in the correct way. And I think the additional resource that we brought in to deal with the backlog helped us focus on that, to make sure that there was a dedicated resource and focus on delivering each of those and making sure that we could bring forward each of those the projects that were identified through the contributions. I think the point that Andrew's making and Alyssa is, how do we then make sure that we sort of embed that into our future structures as a council to make sure that we don't create a new backlog and that the work that's been done is there. So I think the conversation from now on in is around how do you resource that? How do we resource that? How do you take it from the contributions to either create the extra capacity to do what Andrew and his team are doing? Where does that sit within the organisation? And I think that's just one of the conversations that we need to take going forward.
Thank you. You know, it's good to hear that this is recognised. I would like to push a little bit more, I suppose, because I think that, you know, this ball sits very firmly in your court. We know that the history, you know, by 2019 there was a £4.5 million backlog already. Then we had COVID. Then it built up even further. I think this is a good point to pay tribute to Liz Harvey, who was Alyssa's predecessor, who kind of took the bull by the horns on this a little bit. We've had this one-off sort of investment in the PMO gripping this, a really big kind of push to try and clear that backlog, but we do have an ongoing issue, as has already been raised, of money is coming through the door all the time, even if it might not be quite as much as we'd like, but we need to grip spending it. And historically the problem has been in the services managing to spend it. Now, Ross, Roger and Mark, you're all new into your jobs since this issue came up. But, you know, can you say anything more specific about when the PMO, because I think at the minute we've got a year's more funding for the PMO gripping this issue. We're still not going to have cracked through the backlog by that point, according to your paper here. Understandably, these things take time. What are you putting in place to make sure that that is handoverable? I mean, is it looking like continued extension of the PMO role, because this, you know, potentially all the way into the future, or is there a plan in place to hand this over to the services? Because if so, and that's going to happen in a year, that responsibility really needs to be gripped now. I have another question about funding, but I'll leave that there for the minute. Ross?
So the answer at the moment is that we haven't come up with that plan. I think it's certainly a piece of work that we need to complete. My view is that it needs that extra dedicated resource. Where that sits in the organisation, I don't think it really matters, whether it's in the PMO or whether it sits corporately or within the service areas. But we do need some resource overseeing the whole process. You know, Yvonne and her team play a really crucial role in making sure that we've got the agreements in place, and we know that all the conversations you've been asking around viability and what the contribution should be, delivery of that needs to sit in a certain area. You know, and again, whether that sits within Roger's area or Mark's areas for transport and Quentin in education, we need to make sure that we've still got an oversight of that. And I think that resource needs to be within the organisation, and we just need to come forward with that proposal.
Ed and Ben.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I mean, looking at the figures, the balance within the PMO remit for 5.73 and 4.44, that didn't that was purely the backlog, wasn't it? That doesn't include money that's coming in at the present time, does it? Just no. So that's just the backlog. My concern is we're having trouble spending the money we've already got. Is the interest on the backlog ring-fenced, or could we use the interest on that 10 million to pay for project management to move these projects forward?
Sorry, just some clarification on the question. So
if we've got £10 million in a pot that we haven't spent,
in a backlog,
it's in a bank account somewhere, it will be earning interest. I hope if we're doing our job properly, it's earning nice interest. Is that ring fenced at the present time, or could we use that money to pay for additional project managers to help us get that backlog down?
So I think the question specifically relates to finance in terms of that interest. That's a question.
Well, it's contractual really, because I don't know if when we write these Section 106 agreements, whether we are bound by making sure that any interest we gain on that money while it's sitting in our bank account is spent specifically on Section 106 projects that relate to that development, or whether we have free rein to use that Section 106 money to do on that interest on that Section 106 money to spend in other areas. I'm suspecting at the moment it disappears into a big black hole, but if we could ring fence that money specifically to help us get the backlog down, that might be the resources that we need to try and move this forward.
I think it's specifically a question for finance to answer, but obviously any monies that the council holds, there's treasury management which applies to it. I don't know the specifics.
Can I ask Councillor Swinglehurst and Councillor Cook and Ross? Sorry.
Been demoted, Ross.
We will probably explore this. We will probably explore this as a recommendation, but it might be something that you want to put your thinking caps on.
Absolutely. I think it would be a really interesting recommendation to make, but you know, the details would have to come out through Treasury Management and Finance, not present in the room currently. But you know, I would be really happy to see this as a recommendation, so that we can go away and have a proper look at it, because it's a really good idea. Thank you.
Ben.
Before I get into my question, I would just like, if I were sitting in Councillor Swinglehurst's position, I might not think it's such a good idea, because why? Because you can always spend the interest on these projects if you want to, but why would you want to lock council income into these specific projects? So if you ring fence the interest, you'll have to spend it on the 106 thing. If you don't ring fence it, you could choose to spend it on the 106 thing or something else.
Well, at the moment we're debating, you know, how we're going to deliver these monies. So in my view, you know, we want to be delivering these projects efficiently and quickly, and give all that public confidence. I don't know how we're going to do that after 12 months. You know, once Andrew and his team are no longer doing that work, and there's a danger the backlog builds up again. Now, it may not be using the totality of the interest, or you know, but if we could at least make sure that we have a good system, then that makes sense. But what I don't even know at the moment is what we do with the interest or the balance or whatever. So hence this needs to kind of backtrack out of this meeting, go to Treasury Management and Finance to find out what actually happens currently, because I don't know. But if it's possible to retain some of that money, or indeed all of it, I mean, but I don't, you know, all of it would probably be a bit bonkers, because I don't know what we'd spend it on, since the 106 are project-specific agreements. But at least this opens a conversation, and we can sort of start to investigate the detail. Thank you.
Before I come to you, Richard, can I just ask for real clarification? I think it's of public benefit as well. The PMO function that is current, project management office function that's currently been paid for to drive forward the delivery of the Section 106 backlog, is that funded out of the money we hold in the bank from the Section 106 backlog, or is that separately funded?
Separately funded. It's funded by PMO revenue budget,
Right.
for us specifically. We work with finance where on a specific development, let's say, a project has been delivered and it is reasonable and practical to use any remaining funds for professional fees incurred by the council, then we will do so. That is not a standard process. We are in a backlog and we're working with specific budgets that are in place. So as a standard, no, we're using it, it's on the PMO's budget rather than the agreement.
Right, and Ross, I've seen you, Roger, but Ross, you know, going forward, I think, and we'll discuss this in our recommendations, but I think surely we can all agree that we need to get to a point where the Section 106 budget pays for the implementation of its own projects, because otherwise all council taxpayers are subsidising the delivery of Section 106 projects. You're confirming that that is indeed your intention. Lovely, thank you. Roger, and then Richard.
It's just to kind of add, and you've kind of covered it really, is that we're now building in the project management costs into new 106 agreements. And the other avenue that we're exploring is that the contractor can deliver the scheme themselves. It doesn't necessarily have to be third-party contracted through us. So you can come to an agreement about the thing you want done, and the person who's already mobilised and on the ground can deliver the outcome from that, rather than just sticking it on a long list and then delivering with it later. It's got to be there's a balance around the delivery models that we're exploring, and then in moving to that kind of infrastructure strategy for the county for the future, and having an infrastructure resource will be better placed to understand how it might be delivered with the private sector and then with ourselves. But there's certainly the reason why we have a backlog is that these projects were added on to people's normal business as usual job. They aren't necessarily things that people have got the right skill set for in those service areas, and delivering technical kind of physical on the ground infrastructure works. And that's the bit that the PMO is currently addressing, and we need that long-term model for.
Thank you, Roger. That's helpful clarification that this is being taken into account and the new heads of terms being developed. Slight alarm bells ringing for me when you're talking about developers being contracted to do some of the works themselves. Just I can totally see the point if they're on the ground anyway. Great, there's efficiencies there. But then there are presumably real questions about costings and, you know, information asymmetry.
And that's one of the things obviously we need to work through, but ultimately what we're costing in is the infrastructure that's on the wish list or in the neighbourhood development plan, or that, so if we know what the thing is we need and want, and we're assured that we're getting that and the right amount of monetary value from the developer to do it, it can save a lot of time and money than us redesigning, remobilising, finding another contractor, remanaging the delivery of that. So it's one of the solutions is to look at that balanced approach.
Completely get that. Still worried about information asymmetry, but anyway. Richard.
That was very useful. That's leading on, really. The word of the company ACOM seems to come up. You're nodding your head. I've seen it on several projects. Do they give a competitive quote? Do you go out and get, you know, they're obviously project management company. Do you get a competitive quote?
So, in order to deal with the historic backlog, as you know, there's a series of different gain types. My department covers highways, education, off-site play and sports infrastructure, of which we needed to move away from the previous approach, working with Balfour Beatty. We needed a design partner. We procured ACOM through a competitively let framework, so they won that series of work. So we are working for highways specifically with ACOM only up to detailed design. We have changed our processes, and I'll introduce Greg Speller in a moment to the room, where we do realise that we could be even more competitive than that. So where it comes to monies of a medium value, we are going to be seeking additional quotes from mid-ranged suppliers as well. It doesn't warrant any benefits of having a big organised design practice on a small project, for example. So I'll lead Greg Speller in just to give you a bit of an overview of that and the changes there. So Greg.
Thanks, Andrew. Yes, exactly that. So as Andrew said, ACOM look after what we're now classing as the larger projects. Some of our budgets are 433,000, 1.5 million. ACOM are perfectly set to deliver those sort of projects. With the smaller budgets, which could really be anything from £150,000 downwards, we're looking to do what we're calling the SME process now, which is a small to medium enterprise. We've had buy-in from the commercial team that we go out, we can go and get estimates, and so everything will be value engineering. So at every stage, whether it's design or delivery, we'll make sure we can get the lowest price possible.
So at this point, that is only for design. When it comes to actual construction, we'll be following the CPR rules. We'll be working with the highways team in Mark and Ed Bradford in terms of the framework, highways framework that's coming forward in order to get best value from our contractors. In the meantime, we'll be seeking adherence to our CPR rules and going out to the open market.
So Balfour Beatty will be one of the quotees, but not necessarily get the job, because I think many of us on the councillors are not very enamoured by their services.
No, it's not to say that we are working through a historic backlog. Some of the projects, they've got to a point where you've already done 95% of the design. Greg's come in, he's triaged some of those designs, and they're ready to move forward. So where appropriate, we will deliver the scheme through Balfour Beatty, the majority of which have now moved away and following our own processes in place. So generally speaking, that is correct in terms of this backlog.
Thanks. I've got 4 broad sets of questions still on my list to cover under this. Just say what they are. One is about David Hitchner's question regarding interest on the wetlands, which was submitted in advance. I'll come to you in that on a moment. Co-financing, benchmarking against other local authorities, and tracking progress against the backlog and project delivery. Are there other issues that should be on that list? And education, of course. Thank you.
I have one more question on what we're currently
On the current topic, crack on then, Ben.
So there's been a lot of talk about the project management capacity, and it looks like self-evidently increasing the project management capacity has enabled better delivery. But there's also the capacity within services, and in paragraph 38 you talk about the fact that if we wanted to do faster, more delivery, we'd have to build capacity within services as well as project management. But I'm struggling to get a handle on how much does the service manager need to get involved. And then I have if you could kind of talk about that a bit, and I maybe have a question following up on that.
So I guess it leads in kind of to what and Ross mentioned earlier. I think it's, if you were going to exacerbate, if we were going to look at a future model, then it was ensuring that the right capacity is in place within the services who has the expertise to deliver said projects. We work on a day-to-day basis with our service areas, much of which are on the call today, and they run got a lot of their day jobs in terms of is not just Section 106 delivery, it is the wider education service. So that's the meaning of that in the report, is saying that yes, if we had more people in PMO, we could increase delivery. But in terms of a future model, which is to be discussed from this meeting, then potentially it would be, if it were going to move back to the services rather than the current model between both the services and PMO, that ensuring that correct resource is in place.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is the council is going to make significant cuts to its services next year again, and how realistic is it that it will be able to retain, leaving aside the project management expertise, how realistic is it that it will be able to retain the client side capacity with the cuts that it's already planned to make, which is probably not a question for you, but maybe for the cabinet member.
Sorry, Councillor Proctor, I'm just not aware of what you're referring to. Lots of cuts in services next year?
Well, we've set a budget that makes significant savings.
Yeah, but it's actually an increased budget overall. So
it's £43 million down on, well, it's £20 million down on what it is that we actually need to continue services.
But there's no straight line between making savings and cutting services. It's how you deliver those services in a way that's efficient. So I'm just saying, there isn't a straight line. You're making an assumption.
I misspoke
there,
in that case. My question really is, if we're making significant savings in the budget, how, I mean, for example, we're going to make £4 million savings through MERS, and I can't remember what it stands for, but it's people volunteering to leave the council. How can you be assured that you will be able to retain the service side capacity to deliver what is roughly £2 million a year of Section 106 money going forward?
So that relates very clearly back to what we were talking about previously about how do we future-proof this delivery, which is, I think, something that we, want to take away and nail down. And Ross needs to have that conversation with the 151 officer about what's the model here, because it might be that the model here is simply, we're talking about the sustainability of just putting that percentage into the agreement as a charge for delivery. We can't just assume it doesn't cost anything. Of course it costs something to deliver 106, and that therefore that would be an intrinsic part of that arrangement. potentially. So that's so you're right. We need to make sure we have the capacity going forward, because we don't want to end up with service areas that are stretched, trying to do more than they actually have the capacity to do, and we build up a backlog again. So being fully aware of that danger, we want to make sure that we have that covered off. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation, and that we can raise that and really try and get a model that works, not just sort of plugging the gaps. You're right. I mean, Councillor Harvey did a great thing by putting this in to get rid of the backlog, but now we have to do something that's going to work long term.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'd like to just return back to the question of the interest in a specific area, which is specifically regarding to the wetlands. So there was a question raised by David Hitchner, who's a member of this committee, but is unfortunately not able to be here today, submitted as a written question in advance of the meeting. I think it would be helpful if I just reminded the meeting of that question, perhaps. So he talks about, in Appendix 6, there's reference to £556,100 of Section 106 money specifically from phosphate credits. As he recalls, this money is required to keep the wetlands operating for 40 years or so. I actually thought it was 80 years. 80 years. So it's of a very different character to other Section 106 monies, right? Which has to be spent, within the 10 years or less that we've already talked about. And I think this question probably is for you, Ross, as kind of head honcho in this room at the moment, just in terms of what is the policy on that, because it's something that's very new and innovative, and it does require 80-year time frame thinking, which is even longer than councils normally have to do. Councillor Hitchner is suggesting that this money will be invested, probably yielding interest at a rate of roughly 5%. Is there any discussion? Has anything happened around discussing that interest being ring-fenced and reinvest in the management of that? One would think that really ought to be a bit of a no-brainer, but can you comment on that? And if you can't, we'll comment on it in our recommendations. Mark.
So I can comment on it.
Marvellous.
So you'll recall back in May 2022 when we brought the phosphate agreement to Cabinet. One of the agreements in there was, and I'll read it out for you, to allocate and ring-face the phosphate credit income into the specific wetland revenue reserve to fund the ongoing wetland maintenance, phosphate credit administration and investment in further phosphate reduction initiatives across the county. So you're absolutely right, this is a really different sort of scheme. This isn't about we need a zebra crossing and bump, there you go, there's a zebra crossing, thank you very much, and we'll just walk away and leave it there forever. The wetlands in themselves require a good deal of maintenance as we move forward, as we maintain the plant life that's in the ponds. So the initial income was set so that it would, if we'd sold it all on day one, would fund with interest over the period of time, a bit like a reverse mortgage. So you bring down the capital over time to a point when actually at 80 years on the nose, you've got no capital left and no revenue to spend on your maintenance. Your maintenance is complete and you've done what you need to go and do. There was a requirement in the decision to actually look at the fees after 3 years, because we obviously haven't sold all the credits in one fell swoop. So we'll look again in 2026 at what the fees are looking like and what the projection's looking like. So what net present value do we need today to deliver that maintenance over the period of time for the 77-year duration at that point. So the interest is being ring-fenced into that account, and it will also look at funding the maintenance of the other aspects that we're looking to bring forward as well. So it's important we make sure we've got all that money in place.
Thank you. So that's real clarity. The interest is ring-fenced for phosphate mitigation. Yeah.
Can I just ask, is that actually in a separate account, or is it a sum that's being done and we're calculating this is the interest it would have garnered if it had been put into a separate account?
I'm going to say I don't know, only because that really is a treasury management.
I just think a separate account, so that it isn't subject to policy changes in the future, might be useful.
good luck with that.
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
But how can it earn interest if we just do a calculation for how we
through
do
treasury management, we have all sorts of little pots of money, and they're split up in all sorts of different places, all earning different. The finance manager has got quite a job to do, I think. Right, thank you very much. I think we've dealt with that effectively. Now, let me find the right bit of paper. So I've got questions: co-financing, benchmarking, project delivery, and education. Ben, you did want to ask about benchmarking. So did I, but why don't you crack on?
Yes, I can't remember how to phrase my question. So there is reference in the report to benchmarking. I think that might actually have been more benchmarking the policy around Section 106. But since we're talking about delivery, let's talk about it in terms of delivery as well. Do we know which councils are really good at delivering Section 106?
If you ask me which councils are, not as good, I might have an answer. I think it's been a challenge across the United Kingdom, across all councils. When you look at the scale of Hereford's backlog, it is nowhere near the significant urgency that's across other councils, even in the West Midlands. Backlogs go up to 56 million. We are currently at 12, 13 million, and we have a significant plan for delivery. I can't comment on benchmarking against other organisations in terms of where we sit with delivery. It kind of folds into the policy that we've mentioned, benchmarking Section 106 matters, but it's a good point.
I think it arose in our pre-briefing, Councillor Proctor, about what other authorities were doing in terms of Section 106 and SIL. So what we've done is, through our research team, we've identified our benchmark authorities, and we've pulled together the information found on their websites. So we're looking at charges that they levy on Section 106 process matters. So if people apply to discharge a planning obligation, is there a fee levied on that? And what that fee is, because at the moment we don't charge a fee for that service, that process, and we should be. And there's an exercise that we're doing around discretionary charges and introducing discretionary charges. So we're seeing what other authorities are doing on that basis. We're also looking at whether they've got SIL or Section 106 or both. So looking at that, we're looking at what planning software they use, because we are upgrading our planning software. So we are looking at them to see which software product they use. I also extended it after our pre-brief to look at those that have a Section 106 funding bid process, to see if there are authorities out there. So that was the sort of remit, and that is ongoing work across those areas to bring in those discretionary charges.
Thank you both. Presumably, Yvonne, you're talking about what you're talking about there is what you're referring to in paragraph 41 of the report, where you're talking about benchmarking with 17 other local authorities. Can you tell us, A, what is the time frame for completing and publishing that benchmarking work, and B, how, who are those local authorities? How were they decided? I mean, there's, I don't know how many, hundreds and something local authorities in the UK. Why have you chosen those 17?
So it's been done by our research team. So they will have looked at the size of the county, the population, the economy, all of those factors to see why they're benchmarked against us. So the authorities that we have are Bath and North East Somerset Council, Shropshire, North Somerset Council, Wiltshire, Warrington, Dorset, South Gloucestershire, Northumberland, Cheshire East, Rutland, Cheshire West and Cheshire Council, Wirral, Central Bedfordshire, Cornwall, and then I've also gone on to do our adjoining authorities as well to look at their benchmarking.
Thanks. And the time frame for completing that work?
So that is part of an overall planning improvement package that we're looking at. So not only discretionary charges, but looking at our pre-application charging service as well. So it's been led by Paul. I see Paul's got his hand up, with an involvement of a PMO in that process to bring all the information together. We had hoped to introduce it sooner, but I understand, Roger, are you aware of the timescale for that review of the pre-app?
We're going through the process of introducing new pre-op services now, but we've got a capacity gap currently within the planning team. So we're out to recruitment at the moment to bring the planners in that would then help us to then implement those services. So we're recruiting now, so hopefully in the next couple of months we'll be in a position to implement those revised pre-op services.
The Section 106 discretionary charges we want to bring in sooner rather than later, because we're currently undertaking activity which we can be charging for.
Understood. But my question wasn't about when will you bring in discretionary charges or new pre-app processes. My question was, when will you complete and publish the benchmarking?
It's all part and parcel of that exercise. So it's all part and parcel to inform those discretionary charges.
Understood. But you're talking about implementing changes in a couple of months based on presumably completion of that work. So can you give us a date for publication of the benchmarking?
I can't at the moment, Councillor Chowns, because it's an ongoing process that we're doing. So it's a whole transformation package that we want to publish.
Yeah. Sorry for pressing on this, but Roger, is there not a deadline for completion of this bit of desk-based work?
I'll double check and get back to you with the deadline. Paul might know he's got his hands up as well, but we have completed most of that work now, so it should be in the next few weeks. But Paul, do you know the date in the programme plan?
Not the precise date, but we are looking to complete certainly I would say over the next 6 weeks on that.
Great. We'll look forward to an update in your written response to our recommendations then. Paul, did you want to contribute further on this topic?
I did. I just wanted to come back to on the benchmark, Section 106 benchmarking. PAS, Planning Advisory Service, has done quite a lot of work around this area, and it has carried out a number of exercises over a number of years about benchmarking again for Section 106 and other service deliveries within planning. So I'm happy to take that away and look at that, and I can come back on that.
Thank you. That would be appreciated. Right. Any more on that? Is that a hand? No? Oh, go on then, Bruce.
We're talking about delivery. If, for example, a parish council decide to use some of their Section 106 money on a road safety scheme, for example, now a number of these road safety schemes will require a TRO to be introduced, and we're told that if a parish council puts in a scheme, a TRO could take anything up to 4 years to be delivered. Now, if this was the case with the Section 106 scheme, that money isn't going to be spent for about 4 years. Now, whether that needs something, it's not a matter for this committee, I don't think, to discuss TROs, but it is a serious problem throughout the county, so I'm told.
Just to answer that, it's a traffic regulation order, and it's...
You've really taken this on board about spelling out the acronyms,
sorry,
haven't you, Andrew? Top
to
marks.
take that on board. And it is a statutory process. Yes, it can take, I would say 4 years is heavy, but I'm going to plump a guess at can take a year to 18 months. I'm going to hand over to Greg and probably Bruce as well to give a bit more of specifics on that.
Bruce, I think you're number one, just on this issue.
Hello, Chair. Sorry about that. Yeah, just to say, a TRO average 6 to 9 months when we get going.
if the TRO, traffic regulation order, is part of the scheme, the Section 106 scheme, the funding would pay for that. It wouldn't need to wait for the backlog or the queue to the back of the traffic regulation orders, so it can be accelerated and commissioned straight away. Hope that's clear as that one.
Thank you, Bruce.
So yeah, that may have been historically, the challenges in delivery. Certainly, we are trying to expedite that now. And as Bruce and Greg have mentioned, those timescales are different today. We're working with ADL, I think it is, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, to move forward those TROs. He's nodding at me, so I assume it's correct. It may have, like as Bruce said, it may have been in a backlog process, but at the moment, if there's a TRO to be completed, we're moving forward with it. Is that about right, Greg, or am I?
No, you're bang on. So we have two options with Section 106 now. We can use ADL or we can use ACOM. So if capacity isn't with someone, we can go to someone else. So it's all about options if we can get it.
But we appreciate it has taken time.
Just say that there is a TRO outstanding on my ward.
No ward matters to be raised in this meeting, Bruce. I'm sorry, I'm going to be strict on this.
It's an example, but they've been waiting for 2 years for a speed limit.
I'm going to be strict on this. Beg pardon, Richard?
All I'd say is if there's a TRO outstanding under Section 106, give my man Greg a call and he will try his best to move it forward.
Greg's your man. Right, I want to move on briefly to co-financing and then education. So co-financing, in paragraph 39 of the report, you say that projects are value engineered within the set budget parameter. You briefly touched on co-financing. It could be useful, but generally speaking, the impression from that paragraph is you kind of work within the Section 106 money that's available and you do it. There is clearly a theoretical risk that we miss opportunities to do something kind of better and a bit bigger because we're trying to squeeze into the fairly random envelope of what Section 106 can fund. Can you speak a little bit from the delivery perspective about how we could do better at matching Section 106 funding with other sources of funding? And I'm explicitly not talking about anything in my ward as an example here, but how we can marry different sources of funding together to get projects to happen, kind of not constrained just by the Section 106 budgets.
I'll talk on the perspective of Section 106 delivery. I might have to defer to colleagues on that wider sense. But in terms of co-financing, yes, we're working within a historic backlog. Our monies we have in each of the gain types are the monies we have. It's dealt with on a case-by-case basis. So if we are working with a particular parish who does have available funds to contribute to the project, we want to bring together different funding streams where possible. We have internally, ways of doing that. Let's just touch back on youth, education youth, for example. Colleagues in education and the built and natural environment services will work together where necessary in order to pull the correct funding streams available. So we will ask, parishes for contributions where necessary and where brought forward. If we can successfully deliver the outcomes of the Section 106 agreement within the budgets we have, we will do so. But we are working with historic budgets that haven't raised with inflation. So when I mention value engineering, it might be being smarter with our design, making sure we're getting best value for money to bring forward as much of that as possible. So it might be a traffic calming scheme. We might have to reduce it ever so slightly, but using the methodologies that the highways team have put forward and Greg working with them, using smart initiatives in terms of design and delivery. So, sorry, absolutely long-winded response. That's the kind of funding avenues we use for co-funding. It's the same with sports clubs. It's the same with parishes. We try and work together to achieve the overall objectives of the Section 106 agreement. In terms of wider than that, I'll probably hand over to Yvonne.
I was just going to add to that. So as an example, for our our sports monies, we work with the Football Foundation, so we will include them in our discussions. We also point people in the direction of funding that they can apply for. So we will let parishes know what funding streams are available to match against the Section 106, because they can always use the Section 106 as an avenue to match fund to say that we've got those monies available when they make those applications. And again, we work with Talk Community, because Talk Community have a lot of knowledge about the funding streams that are available, so we draw on their knowledge to say what applications could they potentially put forward to match fund against the Section 106. So we're always looking for other monies to bring in to deliver a better project.
Thank you, that's helpful. And is there an opportunity going forward? You know, at the minute we're talking about bringing in extra bits to co-finance stuff we've already got, but earlier we were talking about the vision of getting to a point where we've no longer got a backlog, we've got an infrastructure delivery plan for the whole county, we're integrating all of this stuff beautifully. So are you hopeful that at any point in the future we might get to the point where you can say, okay, we'll kind of put in for 100 grand for this from Section 106 for this thing, and we know it's going to go towards this thing that's got funding from other sources under the auspices of the overall infrastructure delivery plan? Is that just a bit too pie in the sky?
That would be perfect, Councillor Towns, wouldn't it?
Oh, I'm so sorry, Paul. We need a little bell that says when your hand goes
Sorry.
up, because I don't see it. Sorry.
Yeah, I want to come in exactly on that point, actually. So for large strategic projects, where you would expect there would to be a contribution from, say, a series of developments, secondary school could be an example, which last time I did secondary school, it was around sort of 40 million pounds. So they're significant projects. The infrastructure delivery plan is expected to bring out those sorts of relationships between contribution development sites and other funding streams, and it's really important, actually, particularly in the context of the local plan, that's all mapped out. So when an inspector sits down at an examination to hold their court on the testing of the local plan, they will really want to see that evidence. So hence the need for the firstly to get an infrastructure delivery officer in place and the infrastructure delivery plans to support that.
Thank you, Paul. That's great. I thought we were going to segue beautifully to education with Ed, but Ben, I've seen your hand, so.
I actually wanted to come back to something Councillor Swinglehurst introduced in her introductory remarks about how we communicate that Section 106 money has paid for something, and I think at the moment it just popped back into my mind, because if you brought in funding from different sources, then almost all of those different sources would probably want to sign with their logo on, but presumably there would be nothing around the 106. Is that?
Yeah. Obviously, 2023 has been a year. Not just from processes, but for getting things moving and starting making these projects active and a reality. We are starting to think about the back end, and you're completely right. I sit here and within the report I've said, I want to be better on our stakeholder engagement and showing members of the public, what's been delivered. And certainly, I think we are looking at how do we also show that this project has been supported by Section 106. One of Councillor Foxton's projects at Quarry Park Gates, we have a plaque on the left-hand side. We haven't yet designed it, but we were looking at putting something together. And this comes on to the future of actually saying this was supported by these contributions, and putting that stamp on it at the end. I think that's the intention, and we would like that improvement. I just haven't quite got there yet, but it is part of our improvement plan.
Ed?
I think that's perfect, where you're talking about a particular, like the gates where there's a lot of public interest, it might not be as appropriate for a pelican crossing, for instance. So it's. I think we have to be careful in the projects that we choose. I just want to touch on education briefly. Quentin, you've been feeling neglected. But finally, at the 11th hour, is the policy of using a notional catchment area for denominational schools local to Herefordshire, and how is the notional catchment area determined, please?
You've put all the pressure on me there, councillor, but I'm going to now look to my colleague to the left. She's far more wise.
Oh dear.
So yeah, I don't know if it is actually Herefordshire specific for the notional catchment areas, but what we were trying to avoid was actually double counting students. So that's why we've done it the way that we basically have. So every denominational school, although they don't have a catchment area per se, they use Roman Catholic parish boundaries. And what we've effectively tried to do is overlay that on top of the existing catchment areas for other schools, and then try and work out the percentage of children attending schools within that area. And it's the number of those that are actually going to the Roman Catholic schools is what the proportion of the funding is that we calculate.
Okay, I mean, without talking about specifics, but why would, say, a Roman Catholic school be told that they were only entitled to 5%, say, of Section 106 contributions within their area, when over 90% of the children came from within the normal catchment area as defined by Herefordshire County Council?
It's based on the total number of children that are attending schools within their catchment boundary, so their Roman Catholic catchment boundary.
Is it parish or diocese, though, Karen?
It's Roman Catholic parish. It's whatever is in the school's admissions criteria. That's what we base it on.
Okay. I might take this up with you offline if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we've now had a beautiful symmetry because we've had a policy question in the delivery section and we had delivery questions in the policy section. And my beeper is about to go off for the 10-minute warning before this bit ends, which is beautifully timed. I did just want to have a question or two to kind of pick up with you, probably you, Andrew, relating to really to the way that data is presented in the report, and more broadly the way that this material is made transparent to the councillors and to the general public. We did touch on this in the first half of the discussion too. So in Appendix 10, you've listed the projects delivered, and there's some nice pretty pictures as well. Thank you very much for that. But there's no financial information. So I feel that's a bit of a missed opportunity, putting information in the public domain. It doesn't actually say, what proportion of the backlog have you cracked through in the past year? It's great to see that list of dozens of projects, but I think that, the financial information is really important, particularly since we have multi-million pounds of backlog. It would be really useful to display that. I don't expect you to tell me the numbers now, but, as a general principle. And then just relating to the information that was provided largely in Appendix 5. I mean, in paragraphs 20 to 21 of the report, the main report, you just kind of gave some broad brush figures relating to income and drawdown since 2019. We did ask this committee in our request for information dating back 10 years, not 5, because we'd like to see the long-term trends. And we did ask for information to be provided in graphical format, for example, bar charts going back over each of those years, so that it is easier for us and for the members of the public generally to get a grasp on where is this money. It's only if you really love looking at lots of little tiny numbers in graphs that you can find out how much had already been received by 2019, which sections was it in, education and transport, and so forth. So it's really a request going forward that we do as much as possible to help this information be transparent. And it does relate to the point that Alyssa made and Ben just picked up on around the general public understanding what it is that Section 106 do. For example, the general public, and I have these conversations every week, do not understand that Section 106 enables, for example, the NHS to have a bit of extra money to build another consulting room, but it doesn't provide the doctors and the nurses that need to work within those consulting rooms. So there's this real difference between what Section 106 can provide in terms of capital infrastructure and the revenue required to actually run the services so that people can get an appointment with the GP when they want one. Anything that we can do in our role as a council to help communicate more clearly on that, I think would be really, really helpful and appreciated. And we'll try and find a way to phrase, you know, a recommendation around that that will enable you to take it forward. Any comments that you'd like to make on that?
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for the question. Firstly, I'll address the 5 years. There was a timescales, and we were working with our finance team. They were able to put together 5 years worth of information. I know you asked for 10. It came out of a freedom of information request. So those are I know it's a bit of a small chart, and I do apologise, but that is the 5 years. It's not the 10 years, and certainly that's something we can take offline. Graphs were supplied for each of the gain types. A bit small, but again, it only relates to the 5 years. But
There's an error in GTO4.
Sorry?
There's a small error in GTO4,
Is there?
which I'll pick up with you later.
Don't tell me that. But it tells the story that we all know, is that, you know, we're getting more money in than we've been able to deliver, and I think the action that's been taken is that we've set up a team that's looking at this issue. In paragraph 34, I go on to say that we've delivered, and those projects that, yes, I haven't given any specific values there, but in totality, that's 1.36 million pounds worth of projects. We are due to spend this year across Yvonne's teams and my teams £2 million this year, which you look back at 2019, we haven't drawn down those levels for quite some time. And with projected figures of next year, because of the changes and the focus on the projects, we're forecast at 5-6 million. And that is I'm putting my stall out there on a lighter sense. I think we can beat that categorically. So my team's got its work cut out, but I think this is the time that we can actually, we're showing delivery in the sense of making a lot of process changes and dealing with a lot of projects in the backlog, but next year is going to be where the fruits of the labour come through. So yeah, I think roundabout tried to answer some of your questions there.
Thanks, Andrew. And you know, those figures that you cite kind of just really, really highlight. You'll spend 2 million this year, but we'll get more Section 106 money in this year than you will manage to spend. It's only next year that you'll actually start to chip away at the backlog. So I think this is a point to redirect kind of back to Ross as corporate director for this area. You know, I'm sure this committee would want to emphasise the importance of continued grip of this. If we're only going to start chipping away at it next year, then now is not the time to kind of let go the focus on management of this issue. Great. Ed, did you want...
Just one observation I want to share with the room. It's so important we get this narrative right. The story we're telling residents, and what we're telling residents, is the pressure that we are under, budgetary, the pressure that we're under because of all the different commitments that we've got, and that inability to increase council tax the way it should have been increased over the years, the historical sort of fall in revenue that all councils have suffered. The fact that we have over £10 million that we can spend on important infrastructure for residents, and we're not doing it, is really disappointing. And I think that residents will feel somewhat aggrieved if we're turning around in one hand and saying we haven't got any money, and the other saying, well, we have got the money, but we just can't figure out how to spend it or how to do it. So I think we owe residents we've got a huge responsibility to make sure we get this right and we spend the money as quickly as possible to improve their lives.
Absolutely, I totally agree with comments made. I think it's the nature of a historic backlog. You know, you have a set, a number of projects that want to to be brought forward. And you know, we're working with our service areas. We're bringing forward valuable projects, and I think I'm with you know. All I can say is we are with you. I think it's not to say we are not delivering. I will always be up against it when I'm in a backlog, but the whole goal of this is to bring it back to equilibrium as much as possible, so we can be better. As money comes in, it gets delivered much faster. There certainly has been historic projects that have sat there in the abyss. We have been able to pick them up now, triage every single project that we hold, and find a way forward. They don't always come forward as quickly as we'd like. You know, there's scoping, there's tendering, there's planning policy, and planning obligations we need to meet. So all I'd say is we're with you. I think, you know, we're showing, you know, even the small project for Councillor Foxton at Quarry Park Gates, I don't know how many years that lingered, but we picked it up, we got it delivered. And there's many more projects like that, and we're trying our best with the resources we have to get out there and do what's best for the residents.
Yvonne.
Can I just emphasise as well the hard work of the service areas that they put into in terms of scoping the projects and drawing those up with the PMO. It is important to recognise the hard work that they put in, because it's added on to their day job. And as we do this review potentially of the delivery and the mechanism going forward, we need to look at the resource of those areas as well.
Yeah, and I'd just echo that as well, just to say, you know, the services have an existing day job. I get the luxury of full-time managing the delivery on this. They have brought in 2 new processes. They've been able, you know, they've worked with myself. The process hasn't been, we've hit barriers. We've changed the process and we've worked together well. So I just endorse that. The service areas, they are crucial. They are the commissioners. I am the lowly guy who just, from a construction point of view, is good at delivering. So it is a dual process as far as I've always seen it, and they deserve as much as the credit, not credit, but as much as any, you know, going forward. Where we've got to is only responsible because of them, because I only deliver what I'm told to deliver. So yeah, just wanted to echo that.
Thank you. Alyssa, were you wanting to have a...
Yeah, I was just going to sort of add in another thought, which is that the timeliness of delivery, and I completely agree with Councillor Driscoll, it's about, you know, public perception and, you know, you know, thinking, you've got this money, why aren't you getting on with it? Because the other thing is that if it takes forever to deliver something, the costs change. And then you can wind up not being able to deliver it, or delivering a lesser version of it. So there's a very good argument there, a really sound argument, to make sure that the capacity is present to have this as a streamlined, efficient and timely process. And we need to kind of make that happen.
Thank you. So I think we have vociferous agreement in the room among all parties that this is really important, and we're really glad that there has been a lot of progress made in the last couple of years. It takes time to get a grip on this. We're looking forward to chipping away at that backlog and to getting to a point where it is gripped as an ongoing thing and projects are taken forward as quickly as possible. I think we have timed this perfectly, and I would like to suggest that we now take a short break, that we suspend the live stream for a moment while we just discuss within the committee what our recommendations will be. And officers, I think you're going to read and respond to our recommendations anyway, so if you do need to get away now, you are very welcome to do so. Thank you so much to all of you, both in the room and on screen, for your attendance, your participation, your contributions, both today and as you deal with these issues on a day-to-day basis. And we will deliberate. We'll come back online in a moment with our recommendations, but for the moment, could I ask you please to suspend the live stream? Can I ask that the live stream is restarted? You're not.
I'm just going to read them.
We're live again, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you to anybody who was waiting online for us to come back on. We have agreed our recommendations, and can I ask you, Scrutiny Officer, to read them out for the record? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note as well that these recommendations will be published in due course in the minutes for this meeting. The recommendations as agreed by the committee are as follows. There are 10 recommendations. Number 1, review the future schedule of rates for Section 106 as contained in the supplementary planning document on planning obligations dated 1st of April 2008 to ensure they reflect current costs and are updated annually. 2, introduce interim arrangements for Section 106 funding to ensure changes of schedules of rates can be updated rapidly while a decision on adopting infrastructure levy is reviewed. 3, improve parish council, councillor and local resident engagement in updating community wish lists. 4, invite parishes who do not currently have a neighbourhood development plan to submit a parish infrastructure development plan. 5, publish the community wish list in a more accessible format. 6, consider using interest on banked Section 106 contributions to help expedite delivery of Section 106 project backlogs. 7, ensure that the costs of Section 106 delivery are integrated into the Section 106 contributions collected to ensure that there is ongoing adequate capacity to enable prompt delivery of projects, both in terms of project management capacity and in terms of delivery capacity within the relevant service areas. 8, clarify how delivery of Section 106 projects will be managed once the Project Management Office backlog project comes to an end. 9, improve presentation of information on Section 106 funding received and spent, including the greater graphical representation of funding to enable greater public understanding of the process. And finally, 10, report back to the committee on the results of the Section 106 benchmarking exercise to the committee within 3 months.
Thank you very much. If you could just remove the duplication of to the committee in recommendation 10, that would be perfect. Great. Committee members, can I invite you to vote on whether we agree with the recommendations? All those in favour? Lovely. That is unanimous. Councillor Baker has given his apologies but was involved in the discussion of the recommendations. Right, I think that concludes the business for today. Our next official meeting is in May at a date I don't have. Here we are, Wednesday the 8th of May 2024 at 10 a.m. But we do have a work planning meeting next week, so I look forward to seeing you all then, colleagues. Glad to see you look so pleased about it. And I'd like to thank everybody who's still here for their participation in the meeting and wish you all a very pleasant evening. Cheers.
Thanks.